businesslike, but never a meeting of minds, never soulmates, descendants of wholly different Labour traditions. And now a potentially irreversible split after a move unseen in the post-war period, the party suspending its previous leader who had challenged or perhaps misread his successor on his response to anti-Semitism.
This morning, the Equality and Human Rights Commission published their final report into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
Keir Starmer had issued a clear declaration at his response to the report. No place in Labour for anyone who thinks that anti-Semitism is exaggerated or caused by factional fighting. And that was exactly what the former Labour leader appeared to say on his Facebook page before Sir Keir had even got to his feet. One anti-Semite is one too many, but the scale of the problem was also dramatically overstated for political reasons by our opponents inside and outside the party, as well as by much of the media. Those remarks were enough to suspend Jeremy Corbyn, and this afternoon, Keir Starmer reinforced his message of the day.
I made it clear that we won't tolerate anti-Semitism or the denial of anti-Semitism through the suggestion that it's exaggerated or factional. And that's why I was disappointed with Jeremy Corbyn's response, and that is why appropriate action has been taken, which I fully support.
His successor is standing firm.
What I'll be doing is appealing to the party and those that have made this decision to kindly think again.
Turbulence and infighting, they're some of the politer terms to describe a century of the Labour Party's history, from political wing of the trade union movement to opposition in Parliament to government and back again. But never before in the modern era has a new leadership taken the monumental risk of casting out its immediate predecessor, who still has a strong base of support in the party and beyond. This is not a fight that Keir Starmer chose, but it is a fight he's prepared to take on, to ensure that the words anti-Semitism are never again mentioned in the same breath as his party. An iconic figure from the Blair era who fell foul of the Corbyn leadership on Brexit believes the former Labour leader made serious mistakes.
He wasn't exactly dismissive, but nor was he kind of accepting of the thrust of it. And I think when you read the report, it's horrific. It is actually... I first of all watched the headlines on it, and then I read it, and I'd say that in one of those rare occasions where the real thing was worse than the way it was being presented by the media. And I think that, therefore, he's clearly decided that there can be no conciliation with the issue and the terrible handling of it that there's been over the last few years.
A supporter of Jeremy Corbyn is dismayed.
I can hardly express the actual horror at this, not on a personal basis and on a much wider basis. The horror is, there is Jeremy, an anti-racist, a very good man, a man with principles, a man who led the Labour Party, some people would say very wrongly, very poorly. People like me, it was the period when the Labour Party stood for the things I believe in most. I'm very worried for the Labour Party if somebody is suspended when they broadly are defending their position and saying what they think was true about the anti-Semitism campaign, about how he conducted the process to eliminate anti-Semitism. To be suspended for that, that's a form of internal dictatorship that's very, very scary.
Not a man for sentimentality in the political arena. Ruthlessness, even towards a predecessor, still revered by many.
Well, Nick joins us now. A very big move, bold move by Keir Starmer.
Well, Keir Starmer knows that a decision of historic proportions was made today. Now, friends are saying that the day didn't end as he thought the day would end. And they're saying, look, he is not a purger, he's a unifier, but he's not a unifier at any price. And essentially what they're saying is that a price is obviously going to be paid, but the greater cost is in not acting. And if you set a series of tests, as he has done, you have got to meet them. What allies are saying, allies of Keir Starmer are saying, look, he was consulted on the suspension of Jeremy Corbyn from the party and the removal of the whip, but those decisions were made by the General Secretary, David Evans, and the Chief Whip, Nick Brown.
Jeremy Corbyn up for a fight.
Well, the Corbyn count had a big seminar tonight. Some are calling it a council of war. Len McCluskey was there, John McDonnell was there, Seamus Milne was there. And the atmosphere was not helped when Jeremy Corbyn was told of his suspension by a cameraman who had gone to record his response to the report. The cameraman saw it on Twitter and said, "What do you think of this?" And Jeremy Corbyn said, "What?" Now, in the Corbyn camp, they do not accept this explanation that Keir Starmer was at arm's length from the decision. They're saying this is the most consequential administrative decision made by the Labour Party in more than 30 years, and it has the potential to cause a very deep and serious split. But they are hoping for a reconciliation. They are looking for common ground in 3 areas. So the first one is maybe there's a benign explanation of Keir Starmer's response to Jeremy Corbyn's remarks. Maybe they heard Jeremy Corbyn denying the existence of anti-Semitism when in fact what he was saying is, I'm a really serious opponent of anti-Semitism, but it's been exaggerated about how many people in the Labour Party have been under investigation. The second area of common ground is that Jeremy Corbyn, they say, did say that the report's recommendations should be implemented in full. And the third area of common ground is that Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer do agree on the social justice agenda. But some signs of division on the left. I know that at least 5 members of the Socialist campaign group of MPs, they agreed yesterday, sent a message into their group, which includes Jeremy Corbyn saying, we should read the report, we should digest the report, and we should keep our counsel for the moment. And one member of that group said to me, it is very unfortunate that Jeremy Corbyn decided to speak out so quickly.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Well, we did ask Jeremy Corbyn for an interview, but he declined. Earlier this evening, I spoke to Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, and started by asking for her reaction to the EHRC report.
For me, as a member of the Labour Party for many years, I think it was devastating, and I urge every Labour member to read that report and to reflect upon that. And today should be about those people who have faced indirect discrimination and harassment and what we're going to do to change that. And as Keir said, and I want to reiterate, as the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, my sincere apologies to people who have faced that harassment and discrimination.
You were Shadow Education Secretary, which is a senior post, during a period when the report said the leadership chose not to tackle anti-Semitism. Do you feel personally that you failed in a position of leadership in the party?
I think we all failed. There was a collective failure, and that's what the report said. And I tried at the time to raise concerns that were being raised to me
with
about
Jeremy Corbyn. Allegations.
The whole Shadow Cabinet, members of the Shadow Cabinet did that at the time, including Jeremy. Jeremy's acknowledged he raised these concerns, and things were not done in a way that, you know, stopped us from getting in the position that we're in today, and therefore that's incredibly devastating for all of us, and I accept my responsibility as part of that leadership
Because
team.
You told the BBC today that Jeremy Corbyn has an absolute blind spot and a denial when it comes to some of these issues. What does that mean?
What I mean by that is that we cannot mitigate any form of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, even if it's one instance is too many, and therefore some of the comments that have been made about, well, this is a small issue in the Labour Party, any issue of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is something that has to be stamped out.
You were saying he has an absolute blind spot. You said it quite clearly. He has an absolute blind spot. What is that?
I believe that the statement around the small numbers and to suggest that it's a small number in the Labour Party, whilst that might be true, it's completely unacceptable to not understand the hurt and the distress that people are feeling today. It's not about the numbers. It's about the devastation of being found to have acted unlawfully in harassment and discrimination of people on anti-Semitism grounds.
Your colleague, your Shadow Cabinet colleague, Lisa Nandy, has said tonight she doesn't know anymore if Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic. Do you?
I don't believe that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic.
So you disagree with your Shadow Cabinet colleague?
I think that Jeremy Corbyn has spent his whole life trying to fight against all forms of racism and anti-Semitism, and I think that's why I believe he cannot bring himself to think that the party that he was leading led to an increase in anti-Semitism complaints. But that is what the findings of the EHRC report is, and that's what we've got to ensure.
He has said today the scale of anti-Semitism has dramatically been overstated by opponents for political reasons. He profoundly disagrees with this report and as such puts himself at odds with Keir Starmer. Does he put himself at odds with you?
I think he's wrong. I think he's wrong to say that. I think the report is quite clear that there was complaints and that those complaints should have been dealt with more swiftly and that people were allowed to thrive in the Labour Party with anti-Semitic views. I don't believe that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic, but the findings of the report today are absolutely stark. It's very clear.
That will upset people, what you're saying tonight. You're saying clearly that Jeremy Corbyn is not anti-Semitic. In that case, why does he not wholeheartedly support this report?
Like I say, I think Jeremy Corbyn's got a blind spot and I think he's wrong. I think he's wrong and I think he should reflect on that. And I think we all have to. That's what I'm saying. The EHRC was very clear that it was a collective failure of leadership and we all have to reflect on that.
The co-chair of Momentum, Andrew Scattergood, said tonight the suspension of Jeremy Corbyn was a massive attack on the left by the new leadership. Have you lost the left today?
I think the suspension of Jeremy Corbyn was a decision that was made by the General Secretary because of...
Was it the right
actually,
decision?
Today, what we should have been focusing on is the hurt and upset that people felt.
Was it the right decision to suspend him?
I think it was a decision that was made by the party and therefore it was right for them to do that.
But
it was right for the party to take that decision. If the legal and governance unit felt that it met that threshold, then it's absolutely right for them to take that decision. And I support them in taking that decision. But what's important is that we can't politically interfere with that decision because that's exactly what the HRC said we shouldn't do. But I support the party and the legal and governance unit in taking robust action.
Far from Momentum, Len McCluskey has called Jeremy Corbyn's suspension an act of grave injustice. It will compromise Labour's chances of a general election victory if Jeremy Corbyn's suspension is not reversed. Is he right?
We shouldn't be politically interfering with that process. But what I will say is the Labour Party will never govern in this country if we do not understand the hurt, the upset and the distress that we've caused to people via our indirect discrimination, and therefore we have to act and we have to redeem ourselves as a Labour Party, and therefore every single one of us have to accept that leadership challenge and have to implement those recommendations.
But Len McCluskey is saying it's a grave act of injustice. This from a man who had to apologise last week for saying on Newsnight that Peter Mandelson should count his gold. Do you condemn the language of the leader of Unite, one of Labour's biggest financial backers?
Well, Len McCluskey apologised, and quite rightly so, for that comment. And actually it shows how that can really stray into tropes and the indirect discrimination that people have felt. And therefore, I think we all should reflect on that.
The reality is, for many Jews, that in the last 4 years, Labour's anti-Semitism crisis, they've been genuinely frightened to be seen as being openly Jewish, and they have faced increased security measures to even attend a synagogue. How do you make sure that stops now?
It starts today. We have done that already. We've said Keir Starmer's statement today was robust and it was right. My statement with Keir is unequivocal that we failed the people of the Jewish community. We have to understand the upset that we've caused, and not just the Jewish community, but actually our British values. It goes against everything that we stand for, and therefore it was right we apologise, and it's right we implement the recommendations of the report, go further than that, and we set that tone, which is why I'm on the TV tonight explaining to people that I think I failed in the shadow cabinet. I take responsibility for that, and I will do everything in my power as a deputy leader to change that and to make sure that people feel welcome back in the Labour Party again.